It's the next morning. I've got the oven preheated to 550 and I have my Dutch oven. It's been in there for about 30 minutes. I usually throw it in for at least 20. The longer the better so that it can just heat up. We want this heat as high as possible. So if your oven only goes to 500, totally fine. Just as high as you can get it. And make sure you just let that Dutch oven preheat for at least 20 minutes. Notice that you don't see the dough. It's going to be in the refrigerator until I'm totally ready to put it in, which is now. So I've got a square of parchment paper. This is what we're going to put it on. And I'm doing the old trick from grade school where you fold it over into corners into a little triangle shape and cut it. Because my Dutch oven is circular, you don't have to use a circular Dutch oven. I'm using one because that's the shape of my dough. Remember those snowflakes from grade school?
Genius.
I could probably even make that a little bit smaller, but it'll work. And then I'm sprinkling a little bit more of that rice flour. Again, if you don't have rice flour, just use whatever flour you have. All right. Now we're taking the dough out of the fridge. There's what it looks like. I mean, it's supposed to be a little bit springier than that, but again, if it's been in the fridge, I don't worry too much about it. The big reveal. You can see the Banneton gave it that nice little spiral shape. I've got a little brush here. You can just do this with your hands if you want. In fact, sometimes I find that easier. And just brushing off all the parts where it looks like there's a ton of flour.
There's a bunch on this side. Yeah.
Thank you. Lastly, we just had one of these lying around. It's called a lam, I think. You can use a paring knife, a serrated knife, any sort of knife you have, and then just cut. Whoop, it's moving on me. Cut a nice little score. So that's going to be that ear, which we'll see after this comes out of the oven. You can do this in
roughly?
How big or
How deep? Yeah.
how deep? It's probably about a ½ inch.
Okay.
I'm of the belief, and I've gotten into discussions with a lot of people about this, that the depth of the cut doesn't really matter too much. As long as you have something to let that air out as it rises, you're okay. You can get real cute with decorations here and different designs with the scoring. I like putting one just kind of on the side there. You can do multiple, really do whatever you want as long as you're cutting it somewhere, is my philosophy. So, we've got everything put together. Last thing we got to do is just take out our Dutch oven. Be very careful because it's going to be bonkers hot. And the reason we're using a Dutch oven, whoop! Oh, shoot.
Perfect kitchen riffin. What happens? What do we
I
do?
was just thinking to myself,
This has gone too smoothly.
no, I was just thinking to myself, did I leave the last parchment paper in there? And I did, but not to worry. So, we've got that charred. We can discard that, and we're just going to plop it in. So as I was saying, the reason we're using a Dutch oven is that it's going to essentially mimic the steam that you get in a professional oven. And that's going to give you that best sourdough consistency. That's going to go into the oven, a 500 gram loaf. I'm going to check it after 20 minutes. And then we'll see how it's looking. Maybe put it back in for 10 minutes. And in the meantime, if you have a spray bottle, I'll show you what I do with this. Not necessary at all if you don't have water to spray it on. But that, again, helps mimic what a steam oven would do. So we'll see you in 20 minutes. This is what I call moment of truth number 1. Our first peek at it. The big reveal. Ooh, I'm liking that ear. And I am going to give it a spray. Again, not necessary, but the spray just gives it a nice crust. And lets it bubble up. Just give a good coat all over. Doesn't matter too much. I'm going to put this in for another 5 minutes with the lid on. And then I'm going to take it back out, take the lid off, and put it in for another 15 minutes just to finalize it. And that helps get that final crust in there. So we'll see you in 20. So a quick note on the vessels for the bread. This is my $50 Emerald Lagasse Dutch oven. I basically only use it for that. But any Dutch oven would work. And like I said before, you don't need a Dutch oven. But I think this is worth it, especially if you really intend to get into bread baking and make a lot of loaves. Makes sense to fork up the $50 for that. Here are the 2 bannetons that I have. I just got this one, so I've only baked, I think, 1 loaf in it. I think the other shape I've seen is triangular. So, if you don't have these, any shape of pan will do. Or it doesn't even have to be a pan, just something that is the shape of what you want your bread. Throw a tea towel in there, flour it just like we did with the banneton. So here's our loaf. This one turned out pretty well in terms of looks and oven spring. So you can see that spiral from the banneton pattern and that ear, and that's what we're looking for, with that ear just kind of coming up like an earthquake essentially. And that almost black crisp here, that develops really early on in the baking process. So don't be intimidated. Most people, myself included, underbake bread, and it's really tough to overbake it. I know that sounds crazy, but this I gave total time about 45 minutes in the oven. 25 of them with the lid on at 550, and then I turned the oven down to 425 and threw it in for an extra 15 minutes. So possibly my favorite part of this whole thing is cutting into it. I might do a video in the future about cutting bread, because I probably get that question more than any other question. You can cut the bread however you want, but I'm
just picturing a bunch of bakers that have spent hours baking their bread and they're like, I don't know how to cut this bread now, and so they throw it away.
You could always just go straight into it. That's beautiful. But I'll show you. Typically I start from the side and then just go in. But just so you can see the middle of that beautiful oven spring, I'll show you. There's really never going to be a perfect cut, and shrapnel gets everywhere. So just be prepared for that, and be prepared to sweep up a lot of crumbs. I typically have to turn it on its side like this to get a nice clean cut.
Or you could just cut it outside and attract the ants to the house. And
Exactly.
you should cut the oh damn.
So you can see those bubbles forming. It's a nice moist inside and a nice crispy outside. I'll give you the sound test. And then here's what I'll do sometimes is just, this is my preferred method, cutting off a little corner. This is a sneak preview into the cutting. And then I'll just cut one piece off there, one piece off there, one piece off there. So, Lukey,
Oh, sweet Jesus. Oh, sweet
I would have
Jesus.
given that the 5-minute rule.
Are we breaking
Some
bread?
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. It's a pretty solid flavor right there. It's a pretty good chew.
I'm in my happy place. Go make some of this yourself.